Okay, I'd like to call tonight's public hearing to order. Tonight's public meeting is about the zoning amendment bylaw number 3367, 2015, regarding 1620 Prince Rupert Boulevard. Before we move into the public speaking portion, which I will read a statement after, we'll hear a report from our city planner, Zeno Crockett. Mr. Crockett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The subject of today's public hearing is property located at 1620 Prince Rupert Boulevard. The applicant has made an application to rezone this property from M1 to M2. The proposed project requires this amendment as well as a development permit to commence operations. The development permit application will be introduced following the zoning application at the bylaw section of the agenda. The subject property is proposed to be occupied by Quick Load, which presently leases portion of city-owned Watson Island for stuffing lifts of wrapped lumber into shipping containers. This is the pictures of the current operation. This is the storage area, and this is the stuffing operations. The stuffing operations. Within the context of our zoning bylaw, the use is not necessarily a freight truck terminal, as well as it requires presence of shipping container. Consequently, it does not fit into the permitted uses as defined in M1. Placing it into general industrial use, M2, is compatible with our current zoning regulations. Referencing the questions from Council at March 23 meeting, first, about the difference between M1 and M2 permitted uses. The applicable sections of the zoning bylaw are included in attachment 4. About restricting some uses, in communications with the applicant, they are prepared to exclude fish processing and log booming and sorting by section 219 covenant, a copy of which is included in attachment 5. Referrals were made internally and externally. Internal referrals to fire department produced a note and instruction that the fire hydrant located at the entrance into the property must be accessible at all times. Engineering department noted that any increase in infrastructure demand must be reviewed to assure appropriate capacity. This includes water and sewer, drainage, and roads. External referrals went to Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, and as they were concerned about key lock fuel installations, and the applicant agreed to provide a section further to section 219 covenant, which is included in attachment 7. At the time of preparing this report, Mr. Mayor, we did not have a response from Ministry of Highways. However, late this afternoon, I received a letter, which I believe was distributed to you in advance of this meeting, and copies are available at the entrance into the council chambers, and I will read it briefly. The ministry will approve and sign the rezoning bylaw after third reading, subject to registration of restrictive land use covenant on a property title. The covenant will prevent the use of the property as a key lock fuel station until other required studies are completed. The covenant has been submitted and approved by the ministry. This essentially will preclude you from adopting the bylaw at the bylaw section of the agenda, and you can only go to the third reading until we receive the bylaw signed by the Ministry of Highways. As for the public comments, at the time of writing this report, I did not have any public comments. This afternoon, 2 comments were noted on the counter. At 11:45, Mr. James Horn, school board trustee, just came in to look at the package and get some more information. And Mr. McIntyre, speaking for School District 52, noted that the school district is concerned that the proposed rezoning will have a negative impact on the value and sellability of the Canada school property. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Okay, so I will read out my statement of the chair, and then we'll have parties come forward afterwards. A public hearing is organized according to Section 890 of the Local Government Act. Tonight's public hearing involves zoning amendment bylaw number 3367, 2015. The intent of the bylaw is to rezone the property located at 1620 Prince Rupert Boulevard from M1 Light Industrial Zone to M2 General Industrial Zone. Every person present who believes that their interest is affected by the proposed bylaw shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard respecting matters contained in the proposed bylaw. None of you will be discouraged or prevented from making your views known. However, it is important that you restrict your remarks to matters contained in the proposed bylaw. A person may make their statements in writing as outlined in the public notice, and if received by the deadline, their presentation will be read by staff at the public hearing. If a person wishes to make a presentation at the public hearing, they are welcome to do so, provided that the following criteria are followed. This is necessary in order to allow for the recording of the public hearing process. The chairperson will recognize only those individuals who present themselves at the table and speak into the microphone. Prior to speaking, please provide your full name and be prepared to spell your surname for the corporate administrator. Please also provide your residential or business address. Should you wish to read from a prepared statement, the city would appreciate receiving a copy for reference purposes by the corporate administrator. Members of council may, if they so wish, ask questions of you following your presentation. Please note that this is not a question period at which a debate takes place. City Council will not provide any comments on issues raised, but will be in attendance to listen to the comments presented. Should no additional speakers present themselves, the chair will call 3 times for anyone else to speak to the matter, and if no one else comes forward to the public hearing, it will be adjourned. After the public hearing is adjourned, the council may, without further notice, give whatever effect council believes proper to the representations made at this hearing. That being said, I will call first time for any members who would like to come speak to the mic and speak regarding this issue. Welcome.
Thank you. So my name is Cam McIntyre, McIntyre. I'm the Secretary Treasurer for the School District 52. I have with me the Chair, Trustee Tina Last, and Trustee James Horn as well. So on behalf of the school district, we are opposed to the amendment because of the belief we have that it will affect the Canada School property, which is immediately adjacent to the proposed property. The school district, as you're likely aware, has 3 closed schools in the city. The Canada School property is the only property that the district has freehold title to. It's the only one that we can then sell and actually take capital money or use the money from that project for capital projects in the school district. And we believe the impact of the zoning will be negative for that. Now, the property is currently zoned as public, but we believe in the official community plan it is designated as residential. We have had conversations with city staff about our plans as we move forward trying to sell that property. We believe there have been people interested in the property that have also spoken to your staff, and so I think it's well understood that there is a desire to have that property sold and developed as a residential property. And those residences would then be immediately beside this property that you're considering to rezone to M2. So we think residential property would be worth much less money if it's immediately beside a general industrial site. and in fact might make it harder for the district to sell it as well. Some of the concerns we have with the M2 site there, certainly if the expectation for what's proposed would be a 24/7 operation, there'd be noise and light issues. And while the paper and the proposal talked about a green space as a barrier between the residents and that property, that green space is in fact the Canada property, which we hope to have sold. Also, once it's rezoned as M2, there are a long list of other activities that might go in there, including really the general industrial, which could be a whole host of things I couldn't imagine what all might be there. Now we understand that proponents are very involved with the container business. That container business has announced an expansion, is likely to grow. It may grow to the point where this company needs more space than this site provides, and they may then just be in a position to want to sell it while they move to a larger site. And then with an M2 classification, it could be sold for a wide variety of other things that we don't know what that would be at this time. Also, as we looked at the official community plan and around the city, it is not, I don't think there's anywhere else in the city where an M2 site is immediately beside a residential site. And this would be something I think is very different from the official community plan. The school district, I don't believe, is opposed to development, but we need to balance where things are developed with the quality of life for people in those areas. I think if you're going to have a residential property immediately beside an M2 site, I don't think that's consistent with the official community plan or consistent with the quality of life we want our citizens to have. And so, certainly on behalf of the Board of Education, we would urge you not to approve this bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Do you have a buyer for that particular property, or is it just on speculation that you may have a buyer in the future? Because what the issue, of course, is that if we agreed with your presentation, then the city would sit on that property, not receive any taxes from that property, and while your property would also remain undeveloped. So are you telling us that you are having a development, are likely going to have a development soon that's going to be going in there in that green space above that property? Or are you asking us to sit on our property so that as your property increases in value, or that we are not going to drive value from our property?
So we put out an expression of interest in March of last year. We've had some interest expressed by potential buyers for the property. We have one company who's given us a proposal. We aren't moving forward on that particular proposal at this point. We also have bids from 2 different realtors, and we expect to actually appoint one of those realtors in the very short term to have it formally on the market looking for buyers. And our hope is to sell it as soon as we can find an appropriate bid.
So you're aware that property is you would have to also ask for that property to be rezoned?
Yes, we understand that.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay.
Looking at the map here right now, what's immediately behind your property? An industrial site right now. You've got 2 freightways that have been there for quite a while. You know, would they negatively impact your property value if they were to continue as an industrial site being warehousing and freightways?
Our concern is the change from light industrial to general industrial, and we believe general industrial provides the ability for an operation that would be far more disruptive to the citizens that might be living in houses there than a light industrial would do.
Thank you very much. Okay, at this time I'll call on anyone else that wishes to speak. Welcome. please state your name and your address as well, and just click the green button there too for the mic to come on.
Good evening, Mayor Breen and members of council. Tonight I'm joined at the table by a number of presenters. My name is David McWalter, M-C-W-A-L-T-E-R. I am agent for the applicant. And with me tonight on my right from Toronto is Mr. Wayne Carson, who is the the CEO of the Quick Load group of companies. On my immediate left is Don Silversides, probably known to you all, a local legal representative. And on my far left is Mike Scott, former MP for this area, who is the owner, or will be the owner, of the Canadian Freightways property. We're here tonight to talk very briefly about the purpose of the rezoning. It is specifically to allow Quick Load to relocate from Watson Island to another appropriate, suitable site within the city of Prince Rupert. So Quick Load, by relocating within the city, will maintain their tax base in the city and continue to employ the number of people in the city that they presently do. In my mind, this is a housekeeping rezoning. The existing M1 zone allows already the use of freight and truck terminals, which essentially is what the Quick Load operation is. Specifically though, the M1 zone does not allow shipping containers in that particular zoning district, and hence we've applied for the M2 zoning designation upon the advice of your city planner. We concur with the recommendation in your planner's report, and I'd like to offer a few comments in response to the school district's presentation. Number one, this will not be a 24/7 operation. This is a daytime, weekday operation. It does not operate 24/7. We will not be operating at night. There'll be some lighting added to the site for reasons of security, but it is not the long-term intention to have any evening, weekend operations. Number two, the range of uses in M1 is carried forth into the M2 zoning district. There are several other zones, but it is worth noting that the property immediately adjacent to the Quick Load site, the Canadian Freightways site, is also zoned M2. That's the current Williams Moving Storage site. So that zone already exists immediately next to the Canada School property. Mr. McIntyre, in making his presentation, he referenced one offer that he'd received from the Canada School property. That offer was made by me on behalf of another developer that I'm representing. And whether that property is zoned M1 or M2, we would still be very interested in buying the Canada School property. In my opinion, it does not affect adversely the property values. Wayne, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, I'll wait for questions.
Don?
I'll wait if there's questions.
Any questions? My colleagues have indicated that they will be happy to answer any questions, but they don't have anything additional to add. Again, it's worth stressing that this is a relatively benign, quiet industrial use. It is for the specific purpose of Quick Load relocating to this location. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, well, I think Mr. Mish.
So if we rezoned it as M2, you would have no problem with us placing any covenants on there, basically saying that you are going to do just what you say you're going to do today?
Thank you very much for that question. Your Worship, the Council Niche. We have already volunteered 3 covenants on this particular property. One, to eliminate the noisier use of log booming and sorting. We've also offered a covenant to eliminate the permitted use of fish processing. And as a result of the Ministry of Transportation's concerns, we've offered a 3rd covenant to ensure that the property can never be used as a key lock or card lock installation. So we've offered those 3 covenants on a voluntary basis.
Councillor Mish.
And also, as far as a 24/7 operation, I understand right now it's not, but with the port growing, would there be the chance that you would increase that to weekends or an evening operation?
Good evening, Council. Thank you for the chance to present this evening and discuss our business. First, maybe a follow-on question to your comment about excluding uses other than the lumber transload business. We've been in Prince Rupert for more than a decade operating our business and have tried to grow the business, create employment, alleviate unemployment, and pay taxes and be a good corporate citizen. And relocating to this property is the result of a fairly exhaustive and extensive search. As most people here will know, there is not much industrial land that's capable for this type of use in Prince Rupert. So we're pleased to have found this site and think that it can be a good home for our operations. The nature of our business is to grow as opportunities in Prince Rupert grow. So to take the site and say it's for lumber stuffing only from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Wouldn't respond to the economic opportunities that we all believe Prince Rupert has and will possess into the future. So in the context of M2 zoning, we view it as very much consistent with the overall area. The Williams property adjacent to it is zoned M2. The property across the street is zoned M3. And the types of uses that we would foresee undertaking in our business are not much different and are quite compatible with exactly what's happening there at present. So, given the investment that's being made in the property, we wouldn't think, other than the 3 covenants that we've agreed to today that are appropriate, there should be any other limitation on what uses might apply. In terms of operating hours, our Kilmer Group and Quick Load, we've operated different businesses in BC for over 40 years. We very much pride ourselves on being good corporate citizens. We pride ourselves in abiding by all bylaws and regulations. So the City of Prince Rupert will have nuisance and noise bylaws. It will have other regulations that you have our pledge and covenant to abide by and comply with. We very much will work with the neighborhood on any issues and concerns that people might have and address. So we'll try to continue to run a first-class operation and to do our best to grow with Prince Rupert and think that this site is well suited for our long-term business opportunities.
Councillor Cunningham?
Just a quick question. We went through this one time before with the company. What's your definite definition of daytime running hours?
The nature of the transload business is generally daylight is a requirement in order for the business to be conducted safely. So, but also I don't have top of mind knowledge of the city's bylaws as they relate to noise and those sorts of things. But I presume they're appropriate for this type of an area, and certainly you have our agreement and promise and covenant to abide by them.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. Other speakers that'd like to come speak regarding this rezoning?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Kevin Stunder. I run a company called Summit Aurora Developments. I am the owner of the former bowling alley site at 1241 Prince George Avenue in Prince Rupert, as well as I have other projects in the region. I support the rezoning application for a couple of reasons, mainly because it is consistent with the area. I think the big reason that I support this rezoning is it does provide some certainty and predictability for what could be happening with several other vacant industrial spots in the area. I think it gives certainty to neighbors, and I don't see for Quick Load and their operative their business anything negative with that. I think there are some things that are possibly concerning in both M1 and M2 zones. So again, just for the overall reasons of seeing your council look at projects, react to them in in a good manner. I think it again provides that certainty for other businesses in their planning. I thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I don't think there's any questions with that one.
Thank you. Other speakers that'd like to speak regarding this rezoning? Call a second time. Anybody who wishes to speak about this topic? And I'll call one and final last time. Okay, seeing as there is no one else coming forward, I'd seek a motion to adjourn the public hearing. Moved by Councillor King, second by Councillor Cunningham. Public hearing is adjourned. Okay, I'd like to call tonight's regular meeting of council to order. And just before I adopt the agenda, I'd just like to remind council that we have a fairly aggressive schedule tonight, and a lot on the agenda, so if we can try to keep our comments and our ideas as concise as possible so we can get through tonight, that'd be appreciated. Recommendation that the agenda for the regular council meeting of April 13th, 2015 be adopted as circulated. Moved by Councillor Kinney, second by Councillor Cunningham. Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion carried. Item 3A, recommendation that the minutes of the special council meeting on March 23rd, 2015 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Cunningham. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Item 3B, recommendation that the minutes of the regular council meeting on March 23rd, 2015 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. All those in favor? Oh, no.
Yeah, there's a little correction on page 8, number 13th. About the coverage, cellular coverage.
Oh, wait.
It's supposed to be Seal Cove area, not India Avenue.
Seal Cove area is supposed to be correction?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so, can we get a motion to amend those minutes? Moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Niche. Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And item 3C, recommendation that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting on March 23rd, 2015 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Kinney, second by Councillor Goodhara. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, we have two presentations, petitions and delegations tonight. First up is Mr. Jeff Greenwell, Chief Executive Officer of the 2G Group, regarding the Mountain View Executive Suites. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. As stated, Jeff Greenwell, CEO 2G Group. Current address 1946 2nd West, Prince Rupert. I do have a presentation. I don't know whether the planner has it available. Oh, okay. Is it in your packs, maybe? There's a couple of slides, basically, nothing too complicated.
Yeah. We have a small, 2 slides, was it, I think?
A couple of pictures, and then, so two pictures of the property.
This here?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, I think we'll just reference off here.
Sure. So essentially, the council's fairly aware of the project by now, and it's gone through first reading, second reading tonight. And really, it's more of an opportunity for any of the councillors to ask any questions they may have of me, specifically, because I'm not speaking later. So if they wish to have any questions answered, I'll be happy to do so.
Okay. Councillors? Councillor Nish?
The first problem that I have is with the parking on this particular project, and the study or the drawings that I seen previously on this was showing parking through the alleyway. There was, I believe, 5 or 6 spots in the alleyway, and my concern with that is that you're going to put a lot of stress on the alleyway, which is an alleyway and it's gravel, and also where you had the parking spots located. So have you done anything to change this plan?
Yes, we have. We've addressed engineering's concerns with that. So the 2 parking spaces that were directly behind the building have been removed, and they've been moved to in front of the building in that area. So we have 18 parking spaces as per the city's guideline for size of a parking space, and we have 17 suites proposed in the project. So we are providing 1 parking space per suite plus 1 disabled parking space as a drop-off point at the entrance.
Other questions from council? Councilor Thorkelson?
So my question has been, all along with this project, why are you calling it a lodging house or a boarding house instead of just an apartment building? I was confused about why you would be doing that.
It's in the city's bylaw, so we don't really have a choice. I mean, the application has to fit into the city's description of what it would be. So an apartment building would not be rented by the night, technically. So the city calls it a boarding or rooming house. It's a fairly archaic term in some ways. It doesn't really capture what we intend to do. You know, we have no intention of renting by the night, but it would have to be within that context to fall under the proper zoning in the city.
So what exactly do you like? How do you plan to run your business? So could you? I really would like to know, like, executive suites and boarding house. They look like little apartments to me. I just really like to know, like, what is your business plan?
It's twofold. Our main business for 2G Group is we are in the management consulting business. We run large conferences across the country, so we have a lot of clients. As council may be aware, we're running an event here in Prince Rupert in a few weeks. We have 500 delegates coming in for that event. So we deal with some very large global companies, and many of them are either proponents or are currently working on projects in the area. So we have that clientele who we've had for many years. Those are typically people who are senior executives, mid-50s upwards, high net worth individuals, and the companies are paying for the suites anyway. But they're rented typically on an annual basis. You know, companies would take a lease on a suite for an annual basis. But there's questions about the use for seniors, and it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive in the sense of any able-bodied senior could live in the building at the same time as executives. There's no reason not to. The executive clientele is pretty similar in reality to a lot of the people who may decide to live there. So we have 2 plans in the drawings that you have. One shows the building without the elevator, and the other shows the building with the elevator. So the elevator would be built on the south side of the building, or left side as you look at it from the street. And then the corridor would be one additional corridor on top of the annex of the building, so that all floors can be accessed from the elevator. The elevator has to be on that side because it's the only side where you can access every floor, as there's a slight variant in the grade between the annex and the church building like that. You know? So the elevator over there means you can go to every floor. essentially. So I have a presentation at the Senior Center tomorrow, for instance, and at this point, we're gauging the market. We have no issue with having a mix of seniors and having a mix of executives. The market will tell us what is the best clientele in that respect. So it's zoned as a rooming house, but essentially we look at it as a long-term place to live. It'll be operated in a very professional manner. Everything we do is sort of higher end in that respect. If we find there's a big uptake from seniors, then we'll deal with the elevator immediately. If we don't, 8 of the suites are accessible on the ground floor without any use of stairs. And there'd be no need to use the stairs because all that are on the other floors are more apartments. So you could rent 8 of those suites to seniors now. There'll be a vehicle, a sort of a corporate vehicle that will be there, essentially in a corporate limousine style Suburban, that can take clients into town, we'll drop them off, pick them up. Could do exactly the same thing for seniors, So the uses arguably could work quite well together. So we're very open at this point to that mix,
Yeah, follow up.
I guess my last question is why wouldn't that fit under an apartment? An apartment description. That's why for me what the confusion has been. Like, they look like little apartments. Looks like you're running an apartment block. Is it because you're going to have different people in because there's one company that owns a suite? But I don't quite understand why you're calling it a rooming house.
Oops, sorry. Yeah, we'd be perfectly happy calling it an apartment building. That's more really in line with what we do. We're not in the business of renting suites by the night. That's not what we do. So our tenants, the corporate tenants, are signing leases for a year. They'd send different people from time to time, who would occupy a suite. But they would typically put a retainer, if you wish, or put a lease on a suite for a year or 2 years, and then it's up to them who they send there. So it's really more just the city zoning as to why the application's being made in that way.
Councilor Canadian.
As a developer, I'm quite sure you're aware that a senior resident has different codes than a lodging or boarding house. So are you going to be building this to those codes or to a boarding lodging house?
The design will be immediately seniors friendly, so all of the necessary components, other than the elevator, arguably, right? So if we found we had 12 seniors who wanted to live there, then we'd build the elevator right away, But we could rent 8 of those apartments or suites, if you wish, without the necessity of an elevator. The width of corridors, style of bathtubs, panic buttons in the suites, video systems, all of those things are in the plan, yes, and they would be built regardless at the front. It's much easier to build it in the front rather than ripping the walls apart and doing it after, So yeah, that's all included in the idea.
My other question on that is then cost. Obviously, a company coming in to lease this for a year is going to pay a hell of a lot more than a senior can afford. So are you going to have sort of a 2-tiered system, one for seniors, so you're in some way accommodating low cost, or seniors are usually on a fixed income. So I'm interested how you would be looking at half your building being senior and half being executive suites, when the cost factor there would be quite interesting. You would definitely be taking a bath on one floor, literally and figuratively, versus people living upstairs or downstairs paying 2 or 3 times more.
Well, private facility, this would be a private facility, right? It wouldn't attract subsidy from the health authority because it's not providing, initially, it's not providing any services that health authority would deem, essential, right? If it filled with seniors and we began to provide sort of semi-assisted living, then you would get some support, but that's more in the form of wage subsidy than any operating subsidy, so to speak. We do have an issue with, we're gauging what the seniors community in town, what that price point is. And yes, there would be 2 different price points. And rationale behind it would be a senior who moves in is probably there for the rest of their lives. You know, construction phase in the city will come and go, and then it'll be gone. You know, this location is not ideal for a boarding house at all. It's in the wrong part of town. You know, so long term, we don't see that kind of market for it. You know, it needs to be much closer to downtown if it was going to operate that way. So we see seniors as probably, without question, the long-term market for this facility.
Councilor Mish?
So, from my understanding of some of your projects that you've dealt with already is that you've tended to put these up for sale after repairing or fixing up. So I have a bit of a concern with the possibility of you getting a rezoning application as a boarding house and a year down the road after you've fixed the building up and put it up for sale, and someone else comes along and they do what they want to do. So a question I have to you is if we approved it more as a seniors home with giving maybe a temporary rezoning a permit to allow what you want to do as far as a boarding house, but only in a temporary application, so that would protect the city in the long run. Because we all know that LNG might happen, it might not happen. I would like to protect the interests of the city, so I'm asking you if that's something you'd be interested in.
I don't think the city has a provision in its bylaws to do that. You can put covenants on the property, right? So, but essentially it's rezoning from one zone to another zone, So there are specific uses within RM3, which essentially is apartment building or this type of use, right? So there's not a lot you can do with it realistically. It's, there's only those two uses that are there. Can we guarantee that I'll own this for the rest of my life? I actually own a small part of this project. So properties that I've developed 18 properties in the city in the last 12 years and sold 16 of them. But those projects were for that reason. They were primarily single-family dwellings that were bought to resell. This is a different project altogether. This is a long-term hold. The partners in this project are all committed to a long-term scenario. So this one would not be something we would dispose of.
Any other questions? Okay, I think that's good from council. Thank you very much for your time today.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next 4B, late item, United Church is coming to speak to us today. So representatives, please come forward.
Mayor, Council, I am Hazel Bott, and this is Jim Martin and Norma Hidber. We're here representing First United Church regarding the closure of the lane connecting Musgrave Place and Fulton Street. When Annunciation applied for a building permit to construct their new cathedral, they were granted their building permit only on the condition that they delegate a portion of their property to off-street parking. This comes as a surprise to you. There may be a valid reason. While every other church in Prince Rupert has to pay property taxes on their parking lots and green spaces, the parking lot that Annunciation was required to provide shows up on the tax rolls as a playground and is listed as exempt from taxation. On a relatively quiet Sunday morning, a very large number of vehicles fill the neighborhood. Within the block, cars are parked on the Annunciation Church and School side of the lane, from Musgrave all the way to the exit onto Fulton Street. Cars are also parked on the other side of the lane from the United Church parking lot to Fulton Street, except for the entrance to their parking lot. There are always at least 25 to 30 cars in their parking lot, in addition to the cars parked in the lane. On the outside of the block, most of the parking spaces all along Fulton, up 6th Avenue East, on Musgrave, as well as both sides of Fifth Avenue, are occupied by people attending the service at Annunciation. Usually there ends up being one or two in the United Church parking lot as well, and that is on a quiet Sunday. Christmas and Easter is something else again. The map in the paper shows the land closure to be from the end of the United Church property to the Fulton Street exit. This in itself would displace approximately 15 spaces that Annunciation uses as parking spaces in the lane itself, without taking into consideration the parking lot. It is unclear from the picture in the paper what is happening to the Fulton Street exit end of the lane, or for that matter, the existing Annunciation parking lot. Under the lane closure, will the Catholic Church be required to maintain the same number of parking spaces that they currently use? Two members of our congregation met with the City Engineering Department to express our concerns regarding this matter during the week of January 10th, 2014, as we would be directly impacted by any changes. Although we were assured at the time that our concerns would be addressed and that we would be part of this process, we had not heard anything back either from the city or Annunciation until this past week. We would like assurance from the city that the Annunciation parking lot will remain in operation. Neither the neighborhood nor the United Church parking lot can absorb that many more vehicles on a regular basis. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Thank you for your time today. Councilor Silverson?
Yeah, we were assured that the United Church was supportive of this project, as long as it didn't impact on the lane going by the part of the United Church. 'Cause I asked that question specifically, and so are you telling me that in fact the United Church has not had any discussion? Is that what I heard you say with city staff regarding this project?
No, we have had discussion, and we talked about the original people that we talked to. There was various different options available to them, and we said we had no problem with it, except that we need to maintain that the parking is an issue for us. That they maintain their parking, which reduces the impact on our parking lot, and that's the only issue. We don't have a problem with the change. I mean, that's up to them. But the thing is that we recognize that once the property changes hands, there's no clear plan at the moment. And once they own the entire piece of property, they can do with it as they see fit. So we're concerned that the parking, which already impacts us, will get worse. And that's our only concern.
Councilor Cunningham?
That was one thing that was addressed when they came before us, was the fact that that lane closure would not impact the United Church. It was a question that was asked by several of us, and we were sure it wouldn't at that hearing. And I find this really interesting after the fact that we're getting this conversation going, because I know for a fact the parking around there and different events is just phenomenal. Like you have to walk a block sometimes, so that whole area, and the fact that their playground is a parking lot and they're not paying taxes on it, but other churches are, is I find interesting too.
I'll just interject in a moment. So everything that's already been sorted out, what their concern is that once this is handed over, they're not sure what the intention of Annunciation will be. So from our end, we've kind of taken it to as far as we can possibly assure, and we even had, I believe this weekend, you had discussions with folks around the issue, and so I think from our end, I think the further discussion, regardless how we move forward with this, is that if this does go through, that would be a conversation between you guys and Annunciation. But my understanding is that we have done everything possible on our particular end of this to ensure that this would move forward in a certain manner, but unless I'm misunderstanding that. Mr. Long?
Yeah, the process that this particular issue's taken, I think, over 40 years to arrive at the conclusion we're at today, and is an attempt to try and resolve these interests that are different between these two neighbors. We went so far as to engage third parties to have the conversation between these parties to make sure that they could come to their own neighborhood arrangements about how to be neighborly with each other. And I must admit, I thought that had been managed, but sounds like maybe it hasn't. So we'll just have to carry on. As we see it, it's a simple road closure issue, and enunciation has laid out why they want that, and those reasons sound pretty legitimate, and I think council thought they were. So it's just a matter, from a policy point of view, about whether you want to close the lane or not. And the rest of it, I think, is making sure that we make the best of the difficult circumstances. Those uses have been there for as long as I've been around, and the parking sort of probably hasn't improved and probably won't, just because of the circumstance of those uses in that particular location. I'm not sure what we can do to improve that, but that's what the city has been doing anyway.
I really don't like the idea that we characterize as being bad neighbors. Far from it. We've been very good neighbors all the way along, and we'd like to continue to be good neighbors. But the parking issue has been a slight thorn in our side, and we're legitimately trying to raise this point and say to the city that we think there's a responsibility to maintain the parking, whatever the development that they do, some way of maintaining the parking, and we don't have any ability to do that. So we're asking the city to follow through. But far be it from being bad neighbors. We've been good neighbors, and in fact, they use our facilities for several times a week, and we've enjoyed that for a long time.
And our apologies if anyone has been suggesting you've been bad neighbors. I don't think that was the message that we meant to communicate there. But Mr. Long, did you say you had something to follow up there?
Well, the next step in this process, if they are to apply for a building permit to do something, then we'll go through this process. So there are regulations around that we'll have to follow, but we're not at that stage at the moment. We're just trying to encourage a conversation at the neighborhood level to try and maximize the values and the interest that each of these uses in close proximity of each other can work something out. That was the point of hiring a third party to have these conversations.
Councilor Thorkelson?
Mr. Long, what is the requirement for enunciation for parking? Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head, but certainly in terms of our planner, if he's in the back there, might know. But the whole process is we have to go through that if there's an application coming forward. That part is not applicable to the road closure process. It's applicable to applying for a building permit, and then those regulations are triggered. So we're not at that stage at the moment, so we haven't really got to the conversation about, well, you can do this if you do that. And I'm sure we have regulations with respect to that, but I'm going to guess that there's non-conforming involved here, and that these uses have been there for a long period of time, and probably don't meet any of the modern requirements of the zoning bylaw. But I could ask the planner to have that conversation, but this is all fairly premature to anything happening. It's not, I think, what the United Church representatives are trying to say is that we have an interest around parking, and we hear that. We've heard that all along. And when there's a point where somebody wants to change that, we'll take that into consideration.
Mr. Canam?
Well, I don't know if this is premature or not. It sounds like there's a parking problem right now. And so I don't know where it's premature. I just think it should be addressed now. I think it should be looked at, and if there is a problem with the parking, that it should be addressed. You know, like if we're gonna close that lane, and I know on any given Sunday, there's probably 15, 20 cars parked in that lane. And, I know the United Church has their own parking lot. And other than the playground, I don't know of any other parking lot around that area. So I would like to just know what the designations are and how many parking places they are. I don't want to start a war.
Other questions from council? Okay, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate it. Okay, moving on. Item 6A, a report from the Assistant Operations Manager regarding Rushbrook parking. Welcome. And just before you two begin, I'd just like to say to council that the intention of today is just to get some information and background, particularly for the new councilors, and there to see the history of Rushbrook. The intention is not to move forward on any action or decisions at this present tonight, but just to get us to a place where we're all in a common knowledge, and then at another time we can decide or create some sort of plan to address whatever concerns are out around Rushbrook. Continue.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Brain and members of council. For those citizens who may not know who we are, I am Tanya Ostrom, and I am the Assistant Operations Manager at the Public Works Department. Beside me is Richard Pucci, and he is the Engineering Coordinator. We have been requested by council to provide a presentation on the Rushbrook improvement area and let the public see how far we have come and what we need to do next. The Rushbrook improvement area for pay parking is an area defined as the roadway from the Cow Bay Bridge to the end of the Rushbrook parking lot and up Dry Dock Road. The parking along George Hills Way and Dry Dock Road is a 2-hour maximum. If users require additional time, they can obtain a casual user's pass from the pay and display machine in the Rushbrook improvement area. Parking passes are available at a reasonable rate, and the advantage to purchasing a pass is that you are granted permission to park in the reserved pass holders area, which is up top in the blue parking lot. So, Rushbrook history. The first slide is from the late 1990s and shows the boat launch before the renovations. In 1997, the boat launch was enlarged to accommodate 2 vehicles on the ramp at one time. Additionally, a mooring dock was added to accommodate passengers and cargo loading. This slide shows the paving on the ramp and the installation of the new access mooring dock. As you can see, these installations need to be completed at extreme low tides and only during certain times of the year. After receiving ongoing complaints about the congestion in the area during peak seasons, along with numerous complaints regarding camping, boat repairs, illegal dumping, storage, and overall poor site conditions, staff monitored the area fairly closely for a few years. As a result, parking surveys were conducted from May to September for 2001 and 2003. As indicated in the graph, there is a general increase in use. The parking survey provided the necessary data to support the pay parking concept, and at the time, council was looking for ways to generate revenue. Additionally, during this time, all of the ongoing maintenance costs were being funded from general taxation. In January 2004, council authorized the implementation of the pay parking, which was also supported by Tourism Prince Rupert. However, it was not operational until May 2007. This is the area before improvements. Looking at the first photo, there was a lamp standard and electrical kiosk in the middle of the traveling lane. This posed a hazard for traffic congestion during launching. The photo to the right shows the upper gravel parking lot prior to any rehabilitation. Once Council authorized the implementation of pay parking on January 18, 2004, the public engagement process started. Numerous meetings were held with user groups and individuals. The process was extremely helpful as we leaned on the user groups to have them tell us what they wanted to see at Rushbrook. The plans changed a few times as we did not have the financial funding to do what everyone wanted. The public was skeptical. They believed that the money raised should go back into that area. We assured them that it would, but they wanted to see it. Hence the name Rushbrook Improvement Area was established. In April 2007, the Pay and Display kiosk was installed with minor site improvements. Once operational in May 2007, we started off slowly with public education and warning tickets. In July 2008, it was official. Educating the users had paid off. After 14 months of receiving daily calls and visits to the front counter, they ceased. To this day, we've received very few complaints. The Rushbrook Improvement Area Phase 1. This photo displays the removal of the electrical, the road widening, new ditching, and prepping for pavement. In the first photo, at the bottom left corner, you will see where the old pavement ends and the new pavement is about to begin. That extra 3 feet plus in road widening allowed for the parking of truck and trailer along the bluff in the angled parking area. Since we are dealing in close proximity to the marine environment, we are bound by the DFO Fisheries Act, and anything we do must conform to our established permits. As seen above, in the before and after photos, we need to be very careful when we are working around fish habitat. This is very labor intensive and is not as simple as weed eating a lawn. Everything must be completed by hand and cleaned up as you go. Additionally, all tools used need to be pre-washed and inspected prior to use. As mentioned previously, we are bound by our permits when we are working in this area and must protect the marine habitat. This photo shows our crew pre-washing all of the riprap rock used before we could place it around the habitat. Also, all of the machinery used by our forces for this project had to be pre-washed and inspected for any leaks prior to being allowed on site. This slide shows the completion of Phase 1 at a cost of $300,000. This work was completed through the Rushbrook Improvement Fund and a grant with no cost to the local taxpayer. At today's assessment rate, this would have been just short of a 3% tax increase. Rushbrook Improvement Area Phase 2. Phase 2 was completed in 2010. This project saw the paving of the upper parking lot with a proper oil-water separator, bank stabilization, and foliage for fish shading. Again, completing this work was a challenge due to the permitting and the working criteria. This photo shows the stabilization of the bank and the upper parking area as well as the prep for the required fish shading foliage. Phase 2 was completed at a capital cost of $156,000. Excluding ongoing maintenance and staff wages, this would be a 1.5 increase to property taxes to cover this cost. Rushbrook users and revenues. We have 2 types of users at Rushbrook. Casual users, this is anyone that uses the kiosk to purchase tickets, and pass holders is anyone who purchases an annual parking pass. An 8-year average of casual users saw a revenue of $51,358, with 5,828 people using the kiosk annually. Also shown is the pass holder revenue for an annual 8-year average, which was $6,750 for commercial passes and $11,850 for residential. Rushbrook Improvement Area, what's next? Over the past few years, the Engineering and Public Works Department have fielded a number of complaints and noted the deterioration of the boat launch ramp itself. While we have multiple priorities that need to be addressed, once the asphalt started peeling off the ramp, it became clear that this would be our 2015 capital project. In response to these complaints, the city has awarded a contract to produce and install precast concrete panels for the ramp and install riprap at the base. The cost of this work is approximately $200,000, which will be fully covered by the Rushbrook Improvement Area Fund and not the local taxpayer. The next significant project will be the replacement of the mooring dock that will be done in phases subject to funding. After the repairs to the boat launch ramp, we will have depleted our Rushbrook Improvement Area reserve. It should be noted that when we met with the users in 2007, they were advised that the rates would be increased in 2008. To date, this has not been done, and it is recommended that we consider it for 2016. The Rushbrook Improvement Area has been a huge success. The key element was establishing clear procedures and guidelines. We had excellent input from the users, and we worked with them to find solutions to their concerns. For example, users asked for 2 hours of free parking, and for operational reasons, we implemented 2 hours of free parking on Dry Dock Road and George Hills Way, not in the main area of Rushbrook. We have a sign at the foot of Dry Dock Road and George Hills Way at the entrance of the Rushbrook Improvement Area that states, "Pay parking here." Staff conducted studies of fees and charges in other areas and set our rates accordingly. We believe that these fees are very reasonable for residents, especially when the area requires annual maintenance as well as capital projects. Council's support is to continue with the pay parking area at Rushbrook is key to the viability of this area. It is crucial to continue with the current process that is working very well operationally and financially. We need to continue to improve this area as it is our only public boat launch in Prince Rupert, and as such it's expensive to run. The user pay system has been successful, and while the public was skeptical in the beginning, we've now shown them what their user fees have accomplished. Rushbrook is self-sustainable and is a great asset for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Thorkelson?
I have a couple of questions. How much, do you know, can you tell from your statistics how much revenue is generated in the winter?
Councillor Thorkelson, I could, yes, but I don't have that information with me, so I could get back to you on that.
Yeah. I think what people were concerned about was wintertime access, maybe not so much summertime access. And I was wondering if you differentiate at all in your information regarding the difference between commercial fishermen. That is a commercial wharf. That's not a sports fishing wharf. That's a commercial wharf. And the city is charging the commercial fishermen fees at $2 where they have to pay if they're going to go down and check their boat for just 2 hours. And we've had many when the city has a bylaw officer, we find that we have lots of tickets being given out to commercial fishermen who are checking their boats because they're parked down there for more than 2 hours. So, or for they're parked down there and they haven't bought a 2-hour ticket and they really just want to pop down and visit their boat. So it appears to me that it's quite restrictive. It's far different than to have somebody who's going to park all day and go sports fishing as compared to somebody who wants to run down, make sure the boat's pumped out. And so I was wondering, do you have that in your statistics? How many were commercial fishermen as opposed to sports fishermen? Do you differentiate at all?
We don't, but the commercial fisherman is not under a commercial permit. They're under a residential permit. The boundaries for, or the guidelines for the commercial end of it is for anybody operating a commercial business down there. The commercial fishermen who we met with and worked with them, they follow under the $100 a year to have a permit to park there for $100. And that's 365 days in the year.
Councillor Cunningham, and then Councillor Nish.
No, I think Mrs. Ostrom answered the question for me with the $100 a year thing.
Councilor Mish?
The only thing that I would maybe like to see would be if you have the information as far as how many people are buying a one-day ticket in the winter time. That's because maybe there could be an option of in the slow times, if someone could go down there and check on their boat, and they do have basically a grace period, whether it be half an hour or half an hour parking sort of thing, in the times where it's not full, when nobody's in the parking lot. So if you have that information, it would be good to see that, if you could get that.
I will do my best, Councillor Niche, to get that through to you, Mayor Brain.
Councilor Kay?
Thank you for your presentation, Mrs. Ostrom. With regards to the charter boats, now are we going to be having a different rate on that, whereas the taxpayer has a different rate than the ones from out of province?
Of course, I didn't bring this information, so I'm just going by memory, so I hope that I answer this correctly, Councillor. Currently, right now, an out-of-province or an out-of-town person buying an annual pass is $250, and a commercial is $150. So there's a $100 variance there. I believe that to be correct, and my apologies, I didn't bring that.
Thank you.
Councilor Cullinan?
So, Tanya, 250 for a commercial one and 150 for sports fishing, is that what you're saying? So, if a sports fishing outfit is from out of town, but running a fish boat out of there, it's 250?
Councillor Cunningham wants $250 for a sports fishing, but not a commercial fisherman.
Other questions? Okay, well, thank you for your time today, and I look forward to getting that other additional information. Thanks. Okay, moving on. Correspondences for action. 8A, a letter from Ken Bellman, Director of Public Affairs, Prince Rupert Port Authority, a letter of support request for BC Hydro Shore Power Rate for Fairview Container Terminal. And you'll see in the packages there. So the recommendation is that Council approve the drafted letter in support addressed to Mr. Keith Anderson, General Manager, Customer Service, BC Hydro, and direct staff to forward it to him. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Morrow. Discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to item 9, resolutions from closed meeting, and Mr. Mandrick, would you like to read out the resolutions, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. We have resolutions from closed meetings. Prince Rupert Leicester Centre for the Performing Arts through the board appointment. It was moved by Councillor Kinney and seconded by Councillor Cunningham that Council authorize for release at a future regular meeting of Council the appointment of Alexander Hembroff to the Performing Arts Centre Society Board for a 2-year term, and that was carried. Secondly, that the Earl Maw Aquatic Centre re-roofing project read the contract award to Eby and Sons Contracting Limited. It was moved by Councillor Thorkelson and seconded by Councillor Kinney that Council authorized for release at a future regular meeting of Council the contract award to Eby and Sons Construction Limited for the Earl Maw Aquatic Centre re-roofing project, and that was carried.
Thank you very much. Moving on to bylaws. Item 10A. Report from City Planner regarding the rezoning application development permit of 1620, which we heard earlier today. So the recommendation is that Council give third reading and a third reading to the Prince Rupert zoning amendment bylaw number 3367/2015, and we can't do adoption due to the fact that we haven't had full ministry approval yet. So this is just for third reading. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Kinney. Discussion?
I think that that we are that we had a good discussion, and we heard a lot of things at earlier today, and I think that in light of the fact that we already have an operation going down there that was transloading. It was just not stuffing of lumber. It was still transloading. It was done down there for years of fish products for sure, and it must have been other products as well. So I think that this is not going to end up being an issue, I think, for the residential property. I guess we don't have a whole lot of an industrial property that the city has under ownership and control, and we really have to be careful about what we do with areas and how we generate money and how we ensure that we don't chase industry away. And we sure would like to see stuffing of containers done in Prince Rupert, not see them move out of town to either Port Ed or to Terrace. So I think that that with those covenants, that we will, hopefully see maybe other things besides wrap lumber lifts being stuffed into those containers. But I think that as long as our noise bylaw can make sure that we don't have a bunch of, I suppose, really be irritating would be tow motors backup beepers that people could hear at nighttime is probably really what that would be. So I just have a question, and that is regarding the noise bylaw. Does the noise bylaw apply to a zone of M2? Do you know? With the city noise bylaw, if it would appear.
Yeah, the noise bylaw would be applicable for the whole city, so there wouldn't be an exception to it, to a zoning aspect.
Councillor Kinahan?
I think the noise bylaw and the other bylaws we have in place will handle any problems, and I would like to think that the people involved in this are going to work with the city. They've already said they'd like to work and be a good neighbor, so I really don't see it being a problem, and I like the idea that they're in the city and paying taxes and leases.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Item 10B, my recommendation is that we table the development permit number 1511 until we do the adoption of bylaw number 3367, 2015. Moved by Councillor Niche, seconded by Councillor Van Halen. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, moving on to item 10C, report from City Planner regarding the zoning amendment bylaw number 3362, 2015, 1433 India Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've went over this report at March. I can't find the date right now, Your Worship, Mr. Mayor, but it was sometimes in March. So I'm going to be very brief with the report. Essentially, you heard some of this conversation with the presentation by Mr. Greenwell. So very briefly, the application is to repurpose the building which is located at 1433 India Avenue, previously a church, to look something along the lines of this artist rendering. The architectural elevations are in your report, and I've just selected one which is similar to the one that you've just seen. Of course, we talked about the layout and size of the rooms. And progressing to the actual zoning of this location. And so just to eliminate some of the confusion, this property is proposed to be rezoned to RM3 multiple family residential. It is not to be rezoned for boarding houses. Boarding house is a permitted use within RM3. So we are not saying that this is going to be a rooming house. We are zoning it for RM3 for a certain density, and that zone includes also, you can use it as a boarding house or as an apartment. I think I've spent enough time in describing our official community plan and the zoning bylaw congruency between residential and institutional. And I'll just move on straight to the analysis. We talked about the initial analysis. I think it's worthwhile repeating. Additional traffic volumes, we have found that they're not significant. We have considered densification, which is, and retaining it within existing footprint. This picture, this slide shows it slightly. Our footprint essentially reaches in this area here. And so it's at the edge of our footprint. It still works within the context of the intent of densifying our core areas. And it also speaks to, the idea of major projects that this kind of rental units will help with shaving those high numbers in or low vacancy rates, essentially. So facilities of this nature will help with such. The February, I found the date now, the February 10th meeting, regular council meeting, which is the last time the council entertained this subject matter, the council asked the applicant to conduct a public information meeting, which was done, and the report is that 22 people attended the meeting. Council Nish and I were there as well. There were no notes taken, and in the attachment 6 you'll find my notes, which I collected while I was there. At that same meeting, council had a couple of other questions. So they were about parking. And so zoning bylaw requirements for apartment is 1 unit, 1 parking lot per unit. Zoning requirements for boarding house is 1 parking lot per 2 units. And the zoning requirements for senior citizens is 1 parking lot per 4 units. So in all of those cases, as we see the drawings right now, the applicant has satisfied the zoning requirements. The parking stalls are the size of is required in zoning. So he has also satisfied that requirement. We conversed, and I can't recall now who asked the question, if we can place a covenant on that property to assure that after the original intent of working with major project clientele, that this will go to seniors housing. I mentioned it at that time. It is possible, but it's very awkward, and it does infringe on the property rights of the applicant. That being said, council does have an option of housing agreement bylaw, which is permissible under section 904 or 905, which will assure that at a certain point in time, when the original use is no longer there, that it will be for seniors housing. I also did query our building department on the building regulations and BC building codes with respect to seniors housing, not assisted housing, but seniors housing. And there is no specific BC building code requirements to let's say, there is no section in a building code to say senior citizen housing. There are things for those who are handicapped, so we have wider doors, and we have ramps, and we have those installations, such as, for example, the facilities at the where you have care of individuals, where the design, not necessarily because of the building code, but because of the use, with the lower counters, wider doors, and things of that nature. It's simply just a clarification, Mr. Mayor. The applicant, of course, I did speak to the applicant. I did ask him to speak to the council tonight, and as well, he will have an opportunity to speak at the public hearing as well. And so you've heard from him on the main points of the discussion. From the staff perspective, yes, there are some still engineering points that are outstanding. Applicant is quite aware as to what they are. Our engineering department is quite precise, and I urge the applicant to deal with this matter immediately, should public hearing be called in 2 weeks. Because if it did not dealt with prior to public hearing, I will ask the council to adjourn a public hearing until that information is clearly answered. That basically concludes my report, and in conclusion, conditions set at the first reading have been satisfied. The application can now move to the public hearing, which speaks to my recommendation.
Thank you. Okay, so the recommendation on the floor is that council give second reading to the proposed amendment bylaw number 3362 2015, and that a public hearing be scheduled for 7 p.m. and immediately prior to the April 27th, 2015 regular council meeting. Moved by Councilor Thorkelson, seconded by Councilor McKinney. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried.
Excuse me, Your Worship, I'd like to, one of the things that wasn't pointed out, and people at home won't have this package, but, you know, I had a real concern that we're going to build apartments that are going to end up being slum sites after, you know, and I really have a concern about below-grade building just for camps coming into town. And I was somewhat skeptical about seniors housing, because I thought that was just a way to make us feel good about it and not have, and maybe end up with just, you know, a terrible slum apartment after 10 years, and it was just a feel good that it was going to be turned into seniors housing. But I was a little bit dismayed, but also quite impressed with the slides that were presented to us in our package that I think the fellow wanted to put up on the screen. And it was, regardless of the type of tenants, monthly rents will have to be between $1,800 to $2,500 to justify the investment. And so if you're looking at that kind of rent, you're not looking at, I don't believe you'll be looking at apartments that are going to fall apart after 10 years, you know, unless people are going to be, you know, unless people from out of town are more foolish than I thought they were, if they're going to be leasing on that basis and not having quality facilities for what they're paying on a if they're leasing it for an annual thing. So I just wanted to point that out. I that sort of convinced me. I think that an apartment block would be at least a good thing for the neighbors to discuss in that area, especially a high-end apartment block. Although I still laugh at the rents, and really makes us have to work on our housing committee. But, you know, having a place where we have high levels, high-end, as long as we also have low-end, low rent apartment, not low-end apartments, but low-rent apartments we need to have space for both of them in our community.
Thanks for your observations. Okay, moving on to item D, 10D, report from the city planner regarding an application for development variance permit 1433 India Avenue.
Mr. Mayor,
this application requires rezoning application, which we are working on right now, requires a development variance permit and also requires a development permit. At tonight's meeting, I will be introducing development variance permit as it requires a public notification prior to adoption. This variance permit is for the front, so I've highlighted it in yellow. Maybe I'll just make it a little bit bigger. So this application is to vary section 5.5.4 front yard setback from 6 meters to 3.7 meters, as illustrated on this attachment. The resulting encroachment of 2.3 meters into the front property setback will not adversely affect the viewscape, nor the street, nor burden the street unreasonably. And therefore, I recommend that we proceed to the public notification with this application.
Okay, so recommendation is that the development variance permit application number DP 1509 proceed to public notification. Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Morrow. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, up to 10E, report from City Planner regarding an application for development variance permit at 990 Edward Avenue.
So this application is to vary the maximum height from 9 meters to 10.5 meters, essentially 1.5 meters increase in height. And before I talk about this application, just a quick note that the same property, the same family owns a number of lots in this subdivision. And so these 3 lots are owned by the same family, and they're essentially family members who are building new houses here. It's basically the same plan that has been shown. I do know that Councillor Kinney and Councillor Torkelson were here in 2013. Were you there for this one as well, Councillor Cunningham? So, you know, it's the same housing plan that's repeated, but we need to deal with it. And there was a point in time where I was asked to evaluate our zoning bylaw, because in addition to this one, we had another one, and so it almost looked like every second week we were looking at the height restriction. So I sat down with our building inspectors, and we looked at the potential conundrum. The increase in height in this specific location is because, and for this specific building plan, is because the applicant prefers 9-foot ceilings. An average is an 8-foot ceiling. And so the 9-foot ceiling accumulates to the height of approximately, all of these applications are either for 1.5 or 1.6 meters, accumulates to the extra height from the ceilings and from the roof line. And so we evaluated that situation and concluded that you know, to change our height restrictions would probably bring in more issues than to deal with the development variance permits, because we do have some locations, a number of locations in the community that actually value their views greatly. With that background, the property is located on a gully side of the subdivision, and it is not going to present the neighborhood a visual obstruction or some kind of a view obstruction. This is the plan of the project, and as I said, you know, it's the same plan that is being repeated in a number of applications prior. This is that's the first application that was made with the overage on height. This is the lot that they applied for in 2013. They have decided not to build on this lot for the time being, and then move the exactly same plan to the lot next door. And if we look at the street, you can see, and if you drive there, you can see that there's a actually substantial elevation difference between midpoint here and midpoint here. So the end result would be something, a roof line that would be something along the line that I'm trying to extrapolate on this picture. That basically concludes my report, and the application requires, and my recommendation is to proceed to public notification, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. It's a recommendation that the development variance permit application number DP 1504 for 990 Edward Avenue proceed to public notification. Moved by Councilor Cunningham, second by Councilor Niche. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, moving on to 10F, report from the engineering coordinator regarding the Annunciation Road Closure Bylaw number 3360, 2015. Mr. Wall?
Yeah, maybe we can ask Zeno to sit in on this too, since there seems to be... Zeno, hold on, before you go. Come on back. Since it seems that the issues that seem to surround this are more about zoning than they are about a road exchange. As we all know, the road exchange that's been in the process since the 1960s or earlier is really just an exchange of property between the parish and between the city of Prince Rupert. The consequences of that, which I think really don't change anything, because whatever the zoning requirements were for parking are still the same zoning requirements there are for parking that there always were, and I would suggest probably a non-conforming use is applicable for both the church and institutional uses there. And so that we can answer the questions that may come up from council, I would ask the planner to stay.
Continue. Thank you.
So the engineering department is asking council to give first, second, and third reading to the Annunciation School Road Closure Bylaw number 3360, 2015. And this is required in order to complete the land exchange between the Annunciation School and the city of Prince Rupert. As we've gone through in the past, this sort of puts together a bunch of history from the 1960s where we have been using their property for our sidewalk, and I don't know if we need to get into a lot of that history. But what this does is just legitimizes that long-term municipal occupation and the use of the church property in the key downtown Collector Street. And it will possibly in the future enable the parish and the school to expand. We received one letter of concern from the First United Church. They've spoke earlier tonight. They have concerns about parking and about signage. We understand the parking concerns. We feel that the parking concerns are separate from the land exchange. Our department and the building department wouldn't be issuing a building permit unless they were able to house their parking accordingly. So if they wanted to expand their school, move their gymnasium, or do anything, they have a parking requirement that they need to fulfill. And in order to move forward with that building permit and to build whatever they wanted to do, they would have to show us that they could fulfill that parking requirement. So we feel that basically it's going to be status quo there, except that the properties will be exchanged. Thank you.
Questions? Councilor Ferguson and Councilor Cunningham first, and then Councilor Hogan.
Okay, on the parking now, evidently that playground's their parking lot? Is that correct?
So on the parking, as to how people use the area for parking, and that's not something that we can talk about now. But well, I can tell you that all of the properties in that location are existing non-conforming, meaning that at the time of the adoption of the bylaw, the regulations didn't exist, and so therefore, from that point on, we inherit what they have there. And it continues to be inherited. I would suggest that both of the churches, if we were to go measure them by the square footage and the usage, they would not have adequate on-site parking. That's what I mean, that if somebody is using something different on their property for parking, it is not necessarily what I would be looking at. But Mr. Junior Planner to my right is absolutely correct. At the issuance of building permit, No, that's advanced. Yeah. But At the time of the building permit is sought, we look at the parking requirements for that over and above unit. And so whatever is over and above now has to be provided on-site or in some location that's nearby that's satisfactorily close enough to the parking lot. And in this location, we do not have development permit designation, so you cannot buy pay in lieu. So you actually have to provide parking places.
So, like, part of this lane closure is so they can add on to the school. That's one of their, or expand the school or the parish or that. So down the road, if they decide to do that, I would anticipate they're going to run into a problem with their parking. Is that not correct?
I think it's twofold. I think there are some safety concerns that they want to address, and then there's the long-term occupation of the city that we all want to address, and then they are looking to expand as well. They don't, as far as I know, I think they are just, they're looking to expand right now. I don't know how far they are, if they have any designs or anything yet. I don't think so. I think they just want to make sure that that option is available. Again, there's utilities in the lane. There's all these other things that are going on that need to be addressed prior to any building of any structure.
Well, my concern is that if they're closing this lane for future expansion of the school, and then down the road, literally, we can't give them that permit because they don't have the parking. Where's the balance here?
There are always other options. If they look at moving probably their gymnasium over to that side, well, they own the property where their gymnasium is, so they could create parking there. There's a green space that's across the street that's owned by the college, I believe. They can look at purchasing a piece of that and flattening it for parking. They could buy the dilapidated place across the street there and look at doing parking there. I mean, there's a lot of options that within close proximity. As Zeno said, we would only allow it to be close proximity. They couldn't, have parking several blocks away. But within a certain radius, then we would allow that. Thank you.
Mr. Long? Yeah, it's apparent to, I think, anyone who's listening to this conversation that we have a parking circumstance that we find ourselves in that's probably 50 years old in that general vicinity. I don't think it's appropriate to suggest that today's modern requirements for parking, or even yesterday's modern requirements for parking, are really going to hold up anything where any of these uses want to move ahead and continue to be successful. So I get that you're concerned about it, but the reality of that is there are some options, but I think in the end, any applicant would come forward in this kind of an institutional use and suggest to council that they would need to issue development variance permits or other waivers so that they could get on with improving things. There is a problem in that neighborhood. There has been for a long time, and I'm going to go back to my earlier conversation, which is the neighborhood themselves need to kind of see if they can work out what's best for the neighbors and to maximize the benefits that are there. We will certainly encourage them if they come forward. They haven't even come forward and make an application yet. We're just trying to deal with something that is over 35 years old, that the city has an obligation to actually go ahead and exchange this land for legitimate reasons. Have nothing to do with parking. They have nothing to do with what might happen in the future in our land use. These are obligations the city has had for a long time. They're a land exchange. We've been using their land for many years, and it's time, I think, that we get that all squared away, and then we'll deal with whatever application or whatever change that anyone in that area wants to come forward, recognizing that there's probably, we have a parking problem now, we'll probably have a parking problem when we're finished. We just all have to work together as a community to minimize this disruption that goes with that, and at the same time allow that part of the community to probably continue to use, or continue to have those institutional uses that are there. I don't think we can use a land exchange today to try and pre-solve any of the problems we don't really even know what they are yet. I don't think it's going to work to have that conversation right now.
I think Zeno answered my question better. It's just that I was concerned if we're doing a land exchange now with the idea that they're going to want to build later, and they're going to be restricted because of that. And Zeno and Richard pointed out that there's other areas there that can be, there's other solutions to the problem. That's what I was getting at.
Councillor Torkelson? Sorry.
My concern was exactly what Mr. Cunningham expressed, and I would put it more certainly. So I want to make sure that it is actually recorded in the minutes that we are not, that this land exchange and what we are doing is not, that nobody can rely on our land exchange in the future for saying that we have excused the Annunciation Church from meeting whatever parking requirements are, but they can't rely on this land exchange as we were saying from the city that you don't have to meet parking requirements. We can discuss that in the future when they apply for a building permit, but they can't rely on the land exchange and saying the city already gave them permission because of this land exchange not to have to meet parking requirements. That's all I would be concerned about.
Any further discussion? Okay. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Bain. I just wanted to say that the Annunciation Parish is aware of the parking requirements that they will need to fulfill if they go for future expansion. They are aware that they will need to provide that parking.
Thank you. Okay. There's no other discussion, then I'd like to call question. Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Excuse me, actually. I just actually realized I didn't read the motion out. I thought they had already put it on the floor. Mr. Manager, I didn't read the motion out, correct?
No, Mr. Mayor, it does need to be read out and it does need to be moved and seconded.
Yeah, I just, after all that discussion, just got distracted there for a moment. Sorry, I'll read it out. That council give first, second, and third readings to the Annunciation School Road Closure Bylaw number 3360, 2015, required in order to complete the land exchange between the Annunciation School and the City of Prince Rupert. Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Noel. Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. My apologies for that. Item 10G, report from the corporate administrator regarding the Kane Road Closure Bylaw number 3363, 2015.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a request that came to Council on July 28th, 2014, and it was passed and approved that the sale of this property would be acceptable. So this is just one of the procedures that needs to be done in order for this to proceed. This is Protocol Resources wants to purchase this small piece of unused road allowance, which was formerly used as a cul-de-sac prior to the roadway being continued through. This parcel of city-owned land is located in front of the lot at 201 Cairn Road, which is owned by the proponent. And the reason for his wanting the purchase is to allow for himself to build a fence running parallel to the property line at the front of the proponent's property and continuing the unused road allowance and back onto the proponent's property line again. So he just wants to make a clean line rather than have to go around the cul-de-sac.
Okay, so the recommendation is that council give first, second, and third readings of the Kane Road Closure Bylaw number 3363, 2015. Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Cunningham. Discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Item 10H, report from the corporate administrator regarding the Calgary Atlan Uplands Road Closure Bylaw number 3364, 2015. Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is, again, a procedural necessity. Council on August the 18th, 2014 did agree to sell the property known as Uplands to the Port Authority. And as a requirement of that, we do have to do what's called a road closure. There is no road that's actually closing. It's a technicality that needs to be done. So there's no changes. We're just trying to align the property lines of the various lots that are involved in this transaction so that it makes sense to see what's there now is going to be there, but it's going to actually match the property lines that should be aligned in accordance with that. So I did have one inquiry from the public who was concerned that we were going to close down roads within Calbay, and that's not the case. There will be no road closure. It's just a technicality that has to be done in order for this process to go through.
Okay. Given that, there's a recommendation that council give first, second, and third readings to the Calbay/Atlan Uplands Road Closure Bylaw number 3364, 2015, which is required in order to complete the land transaction between the Prince Rupert Port Authority and the City of Prince Rupert. Moved by Councillor Kinnan, second by Councillor Cunningham. Any discussion? Okay, all those. Councillor Torkelson.
We had lots of discussion on this sale of property, and we had lots of discussion. I see Mr. Krekic is gone, but I think what we and the port have concluded a sale, or the port is in agreement that maybe Mr. Long can talk about the things that the board agreed to. I can't remember all of them, but one of them was that because it would become port land and with a sale, that our bylaws would not, our building code or our bylaws would not apply to them regarding the development area, the look of the buildings and everything, and they've agreed, my understanding is, to comply with all of, as though they were covered by the city. Is that correct, Mr. Long? And what were the other things that we had concerns about? Because I just think this is worth repeating.
Yeah, the concern was that our Calbay development plan terms and conditions wouldn't technically be required to be met by the port, and they've agreed to that by contract as opposed to by regulation, and also that they would agree to pay taxes based on BC Assessment Authority, assessed values, or comparable, because statutorily they can't actually use those things, but they would agree to another process where they would effectively pay the same taxes as anyone else would. I think those are the two certain things. This particular piece that that Mr. Maddox is talking about is just the alignment of some of the lines in terms of the road right-of-way lines, etc., so that it all kind of matches with the ultimate plan that we had to sell certain parcels.
Any further discussion? Okay, Mr. Mandick, did I get a motion on the floor there?
You did, Mr. Mayor. We just have to call question.
Okay. There's no other discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, moving on to item 10I, there's a recommendation that council will introduce and give first, second, and third readings to the 2015 5-year financial plan bylaw number 3368, 2015. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Misch. Discussion? Question? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, item 10J, recommendation that council introduce and give first, second, and third reading to the 2015 property tax bylaw number 3369, 2015. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Misch. Discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Lastly, 10K, there's a recommendation that council give first, second, and third readings to the statutory reserves fund amendment bylaw, adding the 4 programs to the bylaw. Moved by Councillor Misch, second by Councillor Moore. Discussion? Question? Okay. Oh, you have a question? Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question is just for Ms. Bombin. This recommendation is just to establish these particular funds, not to develop any policy specific to them, but just the establishment. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. The gas tax program, there's already, under agreement, there's certain criteria by which we can actually pay money out of the gas tax funds. So this is really just moving it from where it sits currently into a reserve, given that there was some criteria changes in the actual agreement itself, which differ from the previous agreement. And the Rushbrook parking is the same sort of thing, where it was always set up as a user fee and a fund that was actually used just for the Rushbrook parking area, improvement area, which you've just heard earlier today. And the RCMP operations program is a new one, and based on my report, it discusses at length what the idea behind that one is. And the asset management program, there would be nothing that would be moved in there. It's asset management is something that we've begun engagement with the public on, and we wanted to ensure that since we were already adding a few programs into these reserve bylaw that already exists, we would add that one as well, so that once we actually do begin asset management, the reserve was already created.
Councilor Ferguson?
I just have a question. I didn't think these were statutory. I thought statutory were ones that were required by provincial statute, which was the parking fee, and I can't remember, there's two others, I think.
Yes, you're correct, Councillor. However, back in 2006, the reserves that don't actually need to be called statutory reserve funds were called the statutory reserve fund bylaw, and these were ones that were created by council. So we've kept the same name, and we've just called it the amendment.
Your Worship, the reason that it's confusing is it took us a long time on previous councils to figure out that some of them we could change and not put money in as by council decision, and some of them were required, we had to put money in even if we didn't like it, and those are the statutory ones, those are the ones required. So maybe in the future we should change the name and just call them council reserve funds instead of statutory, because it makes it sound like you have to by statute, which is provincial law, to have those reserve funds. So I don't know if that's an issue, if we could do that, but we should be clear about our city finances.
The statutory ones are just considered statutory reserves. These ones are set up by bylaw, which is something that can only happen at a council level.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Just for clarity's sake, just a naming thing. Okay. Other questions or discussion? Councilor Ferguson?
Can we just call them reserve funds, council reserve funds? Do we have to change the name, the whole name, or can we just call them, like, what, can we change it?
Mr. Long?
Yeah, we'll have to look, but really, reserve funds, the theory is that statutory reserve funds are more difficult to change than were just standard reserve funds. So the idea is, in the legislative, hierarchy of how we do things, we pass resolutions. So we could pass a resolution to have a reserve fund. We could pass a resolution to do away with a reserve fund. Legislatively, we have to go through first, second, third reading, and final adoption with a bylaw that then requires more legislative work, more conversation, more debate by council. And that's really why we talk about a statutory reserve bylaw as opposed to a reserve or a statutory reserve fund. A lot of naming confusion, but the reality is, I think what we want to do is, if these things are important, then I think we want to make them bylaws, and therefore to change them, we have to go through the legislative process of first, second, and third reading, as opposed to just making a reserve fund, and then just being able to change it by resolution, or choose not to put money in it by resolution, for example. Whereas a statutory reserve bylaw basically lays out, if there are requirements, such as our closure bylaws on our solid waste management, where we're required to put money into a statutory reserve fund, that the provincial legislature has recognized a need to have more legislative process around a bylaw than just reserve fund. So I can see that these things probably warrant the need to have a statutory reserve bylaw, because I think you do want to go through some kind of legislative process before you were going to change them. For example, you know, and I hate to bring up Rushbrook, and I won't, but the reality is that, you know, you probably want to use the money to come out of that reserve fund. You want to make a statement going through the process of having a bylaw amendment when you want to spend the money, because there is some concern on the part of the public that we're not setting aside that money, that somehow it would accidentally trip into general revenues and get spent. So I think that's the reason why we talk about statutory reserve bylaws, and I think that's the difference there. So it's kind of up to council. Some of these you don't have any choice on, some of them you might have the choice on. The four that are identified here, I think, certainly would make the criteria for ones that would be required to have a bylaw.
Any further discussion? Councilor Thixton?
Well, I hate at the end of a long meeting, and maybe what we can do is just pass this. You know, but I would like for one to be clear. I was in a council that was the end of a council that had to eat all of its statutory funds, and there were some funds that we, in order to keep the city afloat. I mean, you have to realize that when we were in 2005, that we were on the verge of going into being taken over and putting into trusteeship by the provincial government. And so we went and used up all of our reserve funds that we could use, and I think we actually dipped into funds that we were not allowed to use, which were our statutory funds. And so I think it's important to have that council by name have knowledge of which funds are required for us to have by the provincial government. And that is funds like if you have parking in lieu, I believe that the money by provincial government statute has to go into an account, and you can't go spend your parking in lieu of money on something that you want. I believe that if you have if you are, I think Mr. Krekik has and I might be wrong, but I think that he has told us that if we have, there's supposed to be so much open space in an area, and if a apartment complex doesn't have as much open space, that they have to put money into also into a statutory fund, and that you can only use that to provide for open spaces, just like you use the parking money that people downtown put in to create new parking spaces, right? And so I'm just thinking that we should be clear about which ones are required by the government of British Columbia that we can't dick around with, which ones that are important enough to us that we can have a bylaw resolution, so we have to have a first, second, and third reading, and another one that we can just pass by a motion to change. But I really think that for clarity's sake, we as councillors need to be clear about what kind of funds we are putting away and how we can access our rainy day funds. You know, is it your 10-year term deposit, or is it your RSP? You want to know what you're doing with it.
Thank you, Councilor Thurkelson. Any other further discussion? Okay. Question? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, so moving on to reports, questions, and inquiries from members of council. Any reports? Councilor Renhart?
Yeah, I was wondering if we can do something about the potholes all over in town. So something should be done about that.
Yeah, I believe that we put, Mr. Long, you can explain.
Actually, not too sure how those potholes happen, but they seem to happen over the winter. We're trying to get to the bottom of it. Okay, that was my best attempt at a joke this late in the evening. We do have, and you remember in the capital budget, and now that we've adopted the operational budget as opposed to the capital budget, there is quite a bit of resources in our capital budget to make some improvements with respect to our potholes and some of our streets. And one of the things we like to do coming forward here is we will have a presentation, probably not right away, but within the next month, and we'll start to articulate and show you the kind of streets that we do anticipate paving this year. Hopefully, the public will see that. They'll have some hope that we're going to make some improvements. We've allocated the budget. We've spent some time with engineering, spent some time with local paver. We're anticipating getting on paving early this year, and I think we're going to have a nice program moving forward. So stand by. In addition to that, our new hot mix machine is working, and I know there was a nice score hot mix patch on a maybe I better not say this, fairly close to my house, coincidentally, and so I do know that they're out there, and I do know that we're working on that. And okay, I'm gonna really regret having ever said that, but my neighbors are happy. So I do know that we are working on that, and I think that we'll come to you with a pretty clear program about where we're going to spend quite a bit of money this year on making some improvements to the roads. Long overdue.
Just Councillor, Ms. Baumann first, and then.
I'd just like to remind everyone that we are complaint-driven when it comes to potholes, so if you do see a pothole, please call Public Works and we will get to it.
Councillor Cunningham?
While we're on the topic of potholes, I happened to fly in today, and I would like staff maybe to address O'Brien or Department of Highways, either put up a sign and a charge for the roller coaster ride when you come off the ferry. And you come across the tracks, and the road is, like, you get a real good bounce out of that. So, and it's not our road, it's a highway, so, and it's probably the first 200-300 feet coming off the tracks. It's quite interesting, and, first impression somebody coming to Prince Rupert is hitting their head on the roof of the bus and then back into the seat.
Okay, now we noted. I have a quick report. Just wanted to mention that I've organized our council to meet with the Council of Lac La Lams this Wednesday. All of council will be spending the entire day with them, and this is for us to begin the process of improving our regional relationships, as well as following up on our C2C action items that we had presented a couple of weeks ago in the community forum. Just wanted the public to know that we'll be doing that. Any other reports? Councillor?
Can the councillors that weren't at the C2C get a copy of the action reports and that, so that we are aware of what we're going to be talking about? Some of us missed that meeting.
I don't believe the facilitator has sent that information yet. However, I did take a picture of the board with my phone, so we can use that as a temporary item. Any other reports?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, well, we have a motion to adjourn. Any seconders? Seconded by Councilor Leach. All those in favor? Okay. Meeting adjourned.